Alright, and here we go. We're gonna do some classic Chemical Plant with Sonic. The classic Sonic, that is. Alright. Have I mentioned that I love this game? Because I love this game. Alright. The beautiful thing about Sonic, man, and I'll tell you guys a little story about when I first started playing Sonic way, way back in the day. So every weekend, I would go and visit my grandma. And the cool thing about my grandma was she worked at a video store. And the video store was literally right across the street from her house, right? So she could get whatever she wanted, games, movies, what have you. So not only would she always have like super cool like Disney movies and stuff like that for me to watch as a kid, but she would also like rent video games for me from time to time. Now, I remember being a kid, and I remember her bringing in this big briefcase when she picked me up one day. And I asked her the whole car ride, what was in the briefcase? What was in the briefcase? Because it was huge. And when we finally got back to her house, now this was what was really cool. She, had me go into this little place. I had my own room in her place. And it was like full of toys and all sorts of cool stuff. So she took the time to hook it all up, and I came out and I saw a Sega Genesis, and man, that was the coolest thing ever. Oh my god, I didn't even see that coming. But it was the coolest thing because that was my first ever exposure to just Sonic and the Sega Genesis. Like, to me as a kid, like, that was just so big because, I mostly had, only played Nintendo. I never had experience with, like, Sega or anything like that. And, so it was like a whole new world and everything, like, something about the Genesis just captivated me. Like, the way everything moved faster, the way everything just controlled the graphics, like, just everything was awesome. And it was just so amazing that it stuck with me. And when it came time for me to ask for a birthday present, my parents had this really cool thing where they would, ask me and my brother what we wanted for our birthday. And we could choose a bunch of like little, like small things, or we could choose one big thing. Now, naturally, in a young kid's mind, the more presents, the better. But there was something that Me and my brother, we were smarter than the average bears when it came to this. We knew that big things could imply video games. So naturally, what we did, we would pick the big thing. So this time around, when my parents asked me, hey, I could pick one big thing for my birthday, and I asked them, I was like, how about I want a Sega Genesis. And man, let me tell you, boy, that was the coolest birthday, apart from when I got my SNES. When I got my SNES, that was awesome too. When I opened up that Sega Genesis, and it came with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I was the happiest kid you could ever imagine, man. Oh god, how old was I? I think I was like 6. I was like 6, I believe. And man, oh god, it was just the coolest, because not only did I get Sonic 2, but I got Sonic 1 as well. But naturally, in my mind, I went right for Sonic 2. So I didn't get a whole lot of experience with Sonic 1 at first, but Sonic 2 was just my jam, dude. And I played the hell out of it. That was the one thing my parents always knew, was that with video game consoles, me and my brother would always get maximum enjoyment out of them. Now, Jake at this point, he was only 2, so he really couldn't, play video games. But for me, like, I just sat there entranced by those games, man. And it was just, Jake would sit in his little crib and watch me play and all that, and he would just be fascinated by all the colors and sounds and all that going on. So it was a way to keep him quiet. But, man, like, just remembering that. Like, remembering that from back in the day. And it opened up a lot of doors for me with Sega games, because it didn't stop with Sonic. It went on to Earthworm Jim. It went on to Aladdin and Lion King. It went on to Vector Man. It went on even to Booger Man. Booger Man was a tough one to get past my mom. She did not care for Booger Man. But there were just so many classic games. Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. Like, just absolute Comic Zone. If you guys remember from my St. Patty's Day drunk playthroughs, I played Comic Zone, and that game was just as hard as I remembered it from way back in the day. But it was just such a cool game, and it was such a product of its time that it was hard not to really love it. And it was a very 90s game. Like, there's no getting around that. Like, Vector Man, Comic Zone, Earthworm Jim, all just very much products of that time period. And that's what makes them such memorable classic games, is that. And let's not forget, Cool Spot. You know, back in the day, you know, food marketing was big in video games. Like, food marketing, like, you had tons of games that were based off of food products. Why is my nose so itchy? Someone's talking about me. I think that's the old wives' tale or something like that. But, you know, food, like, you would have, like, snacks getting video games, like, all the time, man. You had, like, the Chester Cheetah games, you had the Cool Spot games, you had the Noid game back on the original NES. Like, there was a whole bunch of that shit way back in the day, and that kind of marketing was very common. I'm sorry, I don't know why my nose is so itchy. But yeah, like, getting that Sega Genesis opened me up to a kind of a duality, and it was really awesome for that, because I was the lucky kid that had a SNES and I had a Genesis, so I had the best of both worlds. I was never fully committed to just one. I loved them both. I loved everything I got from both consoles, and they both gave me experiences that I couldn't, like, I loved. Like, they were just such cool, amazing systems to have, and the games that I got so much enjoyment out of all of it. Like, I could go on all day about it, but it was just one of those things that back then, it was all simplicity. It was just simplicity in one-player platform games. Weirdly enough, I was not that much of an adventure game fan before the PS1. So I really didn't, you know, cut my teeth on RPGs and adventure games until PS1. So I kind of missed out on, like, Final Fantasy 4 and 6 on the SNES. And same thing with Zelda. I really didn't cut my teeth on Zelda until I got Majora's Mask. But I always had this amazing, wonderful fondness for platformers that I just carried with me throughout my adult life, man. And it was just something that I will never forget. And I still love and cherish platforms to this day, and it's very sad that you don't see them as much as you used to. But, you know, gaming evolves, man. Things are always going to be different. And that's okay. It's okay for those things to be different. I just remember those experiences fondly, and, you know, I just hope that in this wonderful age of technology, it's amazing that people have the opportunities to play those games and appreciate them. Maybe not so much the way that I did, but they can at least go back and play them and have fun with them. Like, that's the most important thing to me as a gamer, is that I love to just see that people can go and appreciate those games from way, way back in the day. And really appreciate what made them just so extraordinarily special. Alright. We got a lot of rings from that. You know, gaming during that period was so special because it was almost like the beginning, you know, when you're talking the late 80s and the 90s as a whole, you know, that was such an amazing progressive period for gaming. You know, it was a wild frontier. There were so many unexplored realms that you could go to, and the sky was the limit. Like, there was just so much that you could do and see and experience back then. And it's only gotten more grandiose now, because now we have games that, trust me, I'm not a bitter old fogey. I love newer games. And I love that they have evolved into this beautiful art form where you're going and experiencing other worlds in a way that we only dreamed of back then. You see, back then, like I said, you know, gaming was still very much the wild frontier. Like, there was so much possibility and so much growth to see, and just watching that progression as it happened is something that I will be eternally grateful for, in just my time growing up in the era that I did. And, I'm not sad for people who didn't get to experience it, but I do wish they could have, in some way, shape, or form, to watch gaming's growth as it happened. I'm sure that's the way that a lot of, people who grew up with, cartoons in their early incarnations felt. Because we've gone and we've done so much. We've gone from a little mouse on a steamboat to just these beautifully done CGI spectacles. It's just such an amazing thing. It really is. And to look back fondly on what I was doing with the Sonic games I was playing back then to now, it is just so incredible to see it this way. And I love it. I love the fact that Sonic is still around. Even though the path has been bumpy for him over the past few years, I love that kids are still growing up. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who commented and said, hey, I grew up with Sonic 2, not only does that make me not feel as old as I think I am, but it just warms my heart to know that all of you got to experience Sonic in some way, shape, or form. And that's the same with Mario, too. It's a heartwarming thing. And I'm not a bitter old fogey like a lot of gamers from my generation are. I love the fact that you guys can experience these things. It's just so amazing. And you're going to go back and you're going to look back on these times that you have with the games that you do. And yeah, there might be a part of you that kind of, remembers all those times you've had with your friends. And that's kind of the special part about your generation. But you'll look back, and you'll remember fondly all the experiences you've had, and you'll appreciate what the art form has become, when you get to a much later point in your life. And again, that's not me being old. I'm only 29, guys. I'm really not that old. But you'll appreciate that the more you go on. And you'll get to see it evolve even more. And just think about all the cool things we're going to have, when, you younger set are my age. You guys are getting virtual reality. You have always grown up being able to play with your friends, which is something most of us back then could only dream of. Like, that was a possibility that just never crossed our minds, but we always wanted. Back then you had to meet up at your friend's house to play. But that's not the case now. And you guys have these amazing capabilities. I ramble. I'm sorry. I love it. I love gaming as a whole. It's just a part of me that makes me feel complete as a human being. Whoops. Let's go ahead and get this. See what's back here. Anything? Anything? No, doesn't look like it. But yeah, guys, I mean, that's kind of like my thing, is that I'm not a bitter nostalgia person like a lot of people that grew up in my generation are. A lot of people just can't accept the fact that gaming as an art form evolves constantly, and we grew up with that. So why some people are so adverse to certain changes, I could not tell you. But yeah, it's just, we need to just appreciate the craft as a whole and how far it's come. Has it had its bad points? Absolutely. I mean, that's not something that you can really ignore. But you have to look at all the good that we've gotten. And case in point, one prime example, Sonic Generations, man. Sonic Generations. It's a great game. I love it. I love it to death. Yeah, S rank, cool. But yeah, man, I mean, I hope you guys remember those moments fondly, all the amazing experiences that you've had, and the fact that you have come into gaming at such a revolutionary point as well. It's awesome. It's just simply awesome in that regard. So appreciate what you've had. You all have grown up in a generation of connectivity where you can play with people from across the world, and granted, that has its good and bad points too. But you came in at a truly big evolution in gaming for those of you who are younger. and you have just so many amazing capabilities all at your fingers. That's just so cool. That's just so cool to me. It really, really, really is. All right. Wow, 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 wow. All right. All right, so I think that's going to do us for this episode, guys. Thank you all for listening to my little ramblings and whatnot. We'll be back with more Sonic Generations. Do not worry, and hopefully my nose will stop itching. Go ahead and like this video, and make sure you subscribe to the Hyper Arcade Turbo Bros, won't you? And we'll see you guys next time.